Welcome to episode 6 of The Truth in Dialogue. I'm your host, Toby Davis, and today I sat down with Brenden, host and creator of MasterTalk, a professional public speaking course. As you can likely tell, Brenden is ahead of his time and has a very wise view of the world. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so my guest today is Brenden Kumarasamy, host and creator of MasterTalk. Brenden, welcome.
Hey, great to be here, Toby. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. So you created MasterTalk as a way to get the public speaking videos and courses and help guides out to the public. Am I kind of paraphrasing that correctly?
You got it perfectly, man.
So describe a little bit more about how that all got started, because you were basically an entrepreneur in that sense as well. And you originally started, it sounded like helping out some students at a college.
You got it, man. So basically, when I was in university, I used to do these things called case competitions. So think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So other guys my age were like playing basketball or, football or some other sport I don't really understand. I used the same competitive spirit that I had, but applied it to presentations instead of sports. So for 3 years, I presented hundreds of times, coached dozens of people on communication. And then I went on to work in the corporate world like most other people from business school. And I just asked myself a simple question, which is, how do I add value to society? How do I contribute more to other people? And that's when I had the idea for MasterTalk, because I noticed that a lot of the communication content out there was really bad. You hear a lot of terrible advice. So I started making videos in my mother's basement. One thing led to another, and here we are today.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the basement, and I watched your video today about mastering your talk on video, being comfortable in front of a camera. And you talked about the first experience and the first videos you had were in a basement, and you talked about the quality being less than they were, at the present time. And I went back, like you said, to go and checked out that first video. And you're right, the quality difference from then until now is very different. And, the videos now look fantastic, look professionally done. I don't know if you have a crew running those or how that's going, but talk about the evolution from that original video to where you are now, and how's it going?
Yeah, for sure, man. So when I started making the videos, you're absolutely right. I frankly thought the idea was stupid. I was like, who's going to watch public speaking YouTube videos? It's like most people watch entertainment or fun stuff on YouTube. Why would they listen to me? But over time, what happened is as the idea slowly developed over time, I had 10 subscribers, 15, 20, and the number slowly started creeping up. I was able to converse with a lot of those people because most of those subscribers at the time, anyways, were a lot of my friends, right? Who else would subscribe to a channel if they didn't really know you, if you're that small? So I just asked them, I was like, how many of you guys are actually watching these videos? And a lot of them raised their hand, and I just, come on, guys, you don't have to lie to me. And they just said, no. And they started summarizing the tips, and I was like, why are you watching this? And they said, oh, the information doesn't exist anywhere. That's when I got on. Like for the first 6 months, Toby, I thought this idea was dumb. But then after 6 months, I was like, oh, wait a second. What if I could be the bridge to every single person who had a great idea? And then I started to really ramp up. I started practicing a lot on camera from like January to September. And I was posting on Instagram like almost every day just to practice on camera. So by the time I had went professional, I'd probably done this hundreds of times on camera.
Yeah.
And I asked my best friend, who happened to be in the video business, I said, could you do all my production? He's like, sure, man, you have a pretty good vision. Let's just do this. So he took care of all of my production. I gave him 25% of my salary, and then we never looked back ever since.
Fantastic. And it looks like, I was looking at some of your stats, like on YouTube, for instance, about 43, just under 4,400 subscribers, 60,000 views, in all since January of 2019. And how fortunate are you to have developed a YouTube-based sort of business right when COVID, pandemic hit us, and we need video-based instruction more than ever. And we need, I would imagine you're looking at going at, training on virtual selling and virtual talks, that sort of thing as well.
You're absolutely right, Ben. So what happened was, I got lucky with, what happened in the sense that when I took YouTube a lot more seriously, my strategy is very different than most YouTubers in the sense that I want to create content that lives forever. So like after I die, I want people to still be able to watch my videos. So, whether you have a movement or a podcast or a nonprofit, you should be able to learn from me in the same way that most people read Dale Carnegie's work and his books and learn from him today. So because of that strategy, I knew I didn't want to post more than once a week on YouTube. So I looked at it more from a workflow perspective. And what I mean by that is if every week I posted one video, that's 52 videos a year for
Mm-hmm.
52 weeks. And I did that for 10 years. So that's how far I think with YouTube. And most people should think long term on YouTube. You probably won't be successful on the
Right.
platform. It just won't work. So that's 520 videos. Right, if you just do the math. Obviously, I don't want to make this a calculus class for those who are listening. But the point that I'm driving is I said, wait a second. If I write a new video every single day, I'll have written my next 10 years of content in a year and a half. So
Hmm.
basically, what happened was even I do this today, it's one of my practices. I try my best to write one new YouTube video every day. And the result of that, which ended up being pretty crazy, I currently have content now until July of 2023. So I'm
Wow.
probably three and a half years ahead of my schedule, something like that. So that's how I kind of took advantage of COVID, and I turned it to a strength rather than a weakness, in the sense that I couldn't fly out for events anymore. So why don't I just write my next decade worth of content that nobody in my industry is doing, so that when business comes back on, sort of like when I can go back to events, I can start being a lot more aggressive with promotion, like I do with podcast appearances and whatnot.
That's smart. Um, what if the climate changes? What if the content in a year that you've written needs to be different? Do you have a chance to pivot at that point?
Absolutely, that's a very sharp question. So the way that I think about this is, since the content that I have is very how do I say this? It's not meant to go viral. Let's put it that way.
Hmm.
A lot of people in my space like do body language videos about like Joe Biden to get a lot more views, and that's smart and everything. I mean, sure, whatever, but it's not really useful to people, in at least in my opinion. So the content that I write is very it's evergreen, and what that means for those who don't know is evergreen means you can watch it 5 years, 10 years later, and it still has the same meaning. So some examples of content is when I break down different speakers. So let's say Seth Godin or Gary Vaynerchuk. So I make videos about those people, and I can do that 5 years in advance because the lessons of that speaker, even if their style will change over time, will still remain the same. So those are examples of stuff that I can do years in advance.
Interesting. Yeah, that's I put together this podcast as a result of a kind of an awakening, in some sense politically, but in a lot of sense, just a way to expand my own knowledge and admit what I didn't know, which is vastly and will always be vastly more than I know. And I started to kind of separate myself in a group think politically and things like that. So I wanted to create a podcast that was going to help people also, you know, latch on and find that same path out of that kind of group think, and kind of realize there's so many things that they don't know and so many things they can learn in life. And that a lot of that was through like Joe Rogan podcasts, which, like you mentioned, are a lot of them are very evergreen. They have content from people. You can learn all kinds of things from podcasts and people he's had on. He's got MMA fighters on some, but he also has people like Graham Hancock, and you can learn about these theories of how the modern civilization started, and you can fall down those rabbit holes. So it's important to have that evergreen content. I think you're right, and that helps you create that long lasting value. So is the purpose of Master Talk to support you, or is the purpose to you know put out that content and to help people?
Right, and the truth of the matter, Toby, is it's definitely both. And what I mean by that is, when I always say about Master Talk, and then I would love to talk about Joe, I think that's a really interesting point you brought there, is this idea that The person who needs Master Talk the most is not the person who watches my videos. It's me. For without Master Talk, who am I? You know, in many ways, Master Talk is a selfish expression of who I want to be in the world
Hmm.
because it gives me purpose and fulfillment and allows me to have a game worth playing. So for me, Master Talk is just as useful to me as it is for everyone else. And sure, I've got clients out of it, which wasn't the expectation at the beginning. I was mostly just doing it to add value.
Yeah.
But there's definitely that piece. But the other piece that you talked about that's super fascinating to me is this idea of how do you avoid groupthink. And what I've always found in my life is that the truth is almost always in the middle, but most people want to think in the edges. So, what do I mean by that? You're either a Democrat or you're a Republican. You're either pro-life or you're not, right? You're either one side or the other. And if you don't pick one of the sides, you can't play in the game. You can't be in the argument at all. Whereas if you think about life in general, the truth almost always is in the gray. It's always in the middle. For example, both Democrats and Republicans probably both like Big Macs. They probably both watch the same Netflix shows. They probably both have a family, right?
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Now,
Yeah, right. Go ahead.
let's say I'm far right. I'm Republican. You're saying the person across the street with the Biden sign in their yard, I can have a conversation with them. That can't be right.
Right, like definitely, right? So
They don't like Big Macs. That's a right wing thing.
it's crazy, man. Like,
Yeah.
and by the way, this what people need to understand out of this conversation is that logic, the way this idea of the truth is in the middle, is where all of the best ideas come from. Like, for example, you bring this back to Master Talk. When I looked at the industry, I was horrified at how bad all of the content was, but no one speaks up about it. They kind of just go, well, yeah, public speaking content should be vague. Toby, you should tell stories. And then you're just like, okay, do I like get a children's book out and do I start reading off do
Yeah.
I like go watch a
Yeah.
Disney movie?
Once
Like it's
upon a
just
time. Yeah.
right. It's just ridiculous. But I think if most of us could apply that logic into our own lives, we'll start to develop new insights that can really make a dent in the world. That's why the advice I always have for people, Toby, and how I came to this bizarre idea of starting a YouTube channel on public speaking in my mother's basement all stems from the following idea. The quality of your life is solely determined by the quality of the questions that you're willing to ask yourself.
Hmm.
And I think for me, what made me successful, because I started MasterTalk at 22, right, is this idea that I'm not more special or more important than the next guy or gal, but I asked those questions early in the game. I would say things like, what are you pretending not to know? If you had all the money in the world, how would you spend your time? And if you died tomorrow, what would your funeral speech say about you? And one last one that I got from Peter Thiel, who's the founder of PayPal. He
Hmm.
says, what is the truth that you believe in that most people disagree with you on? It's not that the questions aren't out there, Toby. It's that most people aren't willing to answer them.
That's a great point. Yeah. And so Master Talk is a way of helping people dip into their critical thinking mode, which everyone can have, but you need to be able to express yourself in a way that others can make sense of what you're saying, that can hear their argument in your argument and be able to learn something from it and add to their argument or be able to argue against you. And Master Talk is a way of helping people do that, right?
Right. You could think of my ultimate vision for Master Talk to weaponize the best people in the world who have the greatest ideas so that the greatest ideas win. Right. And I think what's unfortunate about today's society is a 7-year old in Cambodia who has this fantastic idea just doesn't have access to the resources that she needs, whether it be my YouTube channel or really just any other tool, to make her ideas be more shared. So for me, by being that bridge between every great idea, the society in which we live in will move a lot faster at warp speed as more and more people start to have the courage to share ideas. I mean, since we share the same interests, I mean, with the podcast that Eric Weinstein started, The Portal, he's been wanting to do that for 8 years. And he's very public about the fact that he didn't want to do it for like 7 of those years.
Yeah.
And then he realized that the only way to share it is for him to take the risk of him being at the front center. But if I created a world, or else that's the hope with Master Talk anyways, where every person had the courage to do that I slowly do through my small YouTube videos, my small contribution to the world would just be a better place.
Agreed. It would be. And to your, you know, I was thinking while you were talking about this college course that I was recently taking. I'm trying to finish my degree, and it's funny that things come to you when you least expect them. So this was a English writing course. The theme of the course was what good is a college education anyway? And it did a good job of giving you just information that swayed one way or the other. And a lot of it talked about the access to technology nowadays, like YouTube, and the democratization of information versus, college 30 years ago, where this information, like public speaking, may have been, so to speak, locked behind the doors of these institutions, universities and whatnot. So you're kind of the epitome of what this, one of the points of what good is the college education, because you've taken a public speaking course and put it on a platform where anyone can get to it.
Absolutely. I definitely think that's one of the things that I'm trying to do. But also empower the people who do teach public speaking to do it better. Like at least if you're going to teach a course, do it in the right way. Like focus on the right subjects. Like one thing that boggles my mind is how can you possibly go into a communication course and not be allowed to present the topic that you actually care about? It's
Yeah.
like if you came into one of my classes, let's say there was a fictional class, and then I said, Toby, I need you to talk about pineapples next week. You're just like, okay. I mean, I guess pineapples are cool, but can I just pick some? No, no, no. You got to pick between this list. You got to pick between pineapples or you talk about pistachios. You're just like, wait, this makes absolutely zero sense. But you do it because the teacher tells you to.
Yeah.
Versus when I think about public speaking, I'm always proud to say my most successful client is a 6-year-old. I just went up to that 6-year-old. I said, "What do you care about?" She's like, "School." And I was like, "Cool. What do you like about school?" She's like, "My first day was awesome." And I said, "Make a presentation around that." Simple.
Yeah.
We are, yeah. So
That's great. Yeah. So I don't know if you've caught The Social Dilemma on Netflix,
I've heard of it.
or yeah.
Haven't
So
watched it though. Is it any good?
it's very good, and apparently 30 to 40 million people watched it within a month or so. So it's a big following, a big, huge following. It's kind of, in a sense, gone viral.
Wow.
Well, what it centers around is the tech giants and the way they've created a lot of these platforms. And that's anything from Facebook to Twitter to Instagram to YouTube, even. So the platform we're both trying to utilize, and how they've taken an economy of attention and created, basically one of the taglines is, if the product is free, then you're the product.
Yep.
And so it's this idea of suggested content to keep you engaged as long as possible. So on YouTube, where you have MasterTalk and you're trying to get out this idea to the world to empower them to weaponize their ability to speak, how can you fight against YouTube's algorithm that it wants to keep people engaged in polarizing topics? Or, I mean, if they like football videos, then it's going to keep suggesting football videos. How do you get your message out in an environment like that?
That's a super powerful question, one man. I love that, Toby. That's really good. So the way that I think of this, and I definitely don't have the perfect answer, but I'll give you my educated guess. The first thing that I'll say, going back to this idea of the truth is always in the middle, I have an opposite view about social media, which is the following. It's not, I think maybe, like, I haven't seen Social Dilemma, so I can't really comment on that part too much.
Mm-hmm.
But this idea that I think too many people focus too much on the negative aspects of social media, but they don't try and understand the incentive. Because remember, everyone, there's never usually an issue with the people. It's always the incentive that incentivizes those people to act in a certain way. So think about the news and the media, right? That's an example I like to use. Everyone says news is negative. Everyone says news is bad and it's terrible. And it is in many ways. But the question we'd ask ourselves is why? Well, if you think about it just from a structural perspective, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, there was 3 cable channels and you didn't really have that much choice. There wasn't that much places to get attention. So it made sense for you to either be subscribed to all three, and it was incentivizing for the media company to be a truth telling business,
Hmm.
right? Which is
Right.
because there's a lot of money to be made, right? It's just, but now as that attention has become more and more competitive, it's not the news business wants to tell you negative things, is that the incentive for them now has transferred from being a truth telling business because the profits just aren't there to being an entertainment business, right? No one's going to watch the news if everything about the news is positive. So it's not about the companies choosing the narrative for the customers. I think it's actually the opposite. In some cases, it could be that
Yeah.
situation. But I think the average, though that is a bold statement, is rather saying the opposite. Social media, the way that we consume content is like a mirror. They're just reacting to what makes the most sense. So, building on that analogy, if we know that most people want to watch football and that's what they're going to, I mean, I was watching MMA fights 2 days ago, and now all my YouTube, and even if I don't even watch sports, and now it's all filled with MMA, and I was like, but I've been watching personal development for like seven years straight or something, and now it just switches the algo.
Yeah.
So how do you reverse that? I think the secret, and I think Seth Godin has the right idea here, is this idea of having the smallest viable audience. Make great things for a small group of people who think this idea is world class. So for me, I realized really quickly with MasterTalk, hence why I was able to grow to a certain extent without the algorithm. Though one of the videos did help me out from YouTube, so thanks to the YouTube gods. But I guess in general, the way that I thought about it was, what is the one or two verticals of the people who need my idea the most and why? Despite the fact that they get bombarded with all of the other stuff. Who are the people who will take that step and say, "Oh, MasterTalk is going to be a priority in my life, learning public speaking, I mean." And the vertical, which took me a long time to find out, was podcast hosts. Podcast hosts, whether you have a sports show or a political show or any type of show, well, your selfish incentive is to be a better communicator. So when you see something like Master Talk that exists, you go, wow, makes more sense. But it's also the double divide in the sense of, this is good for me, but hey, I probably want to show this to my audience too. Let's bring Brenden on the podcast. So for the key that I'm driving at is for your ideas, whether it's a cupcake recipe, whether it's a podcast like this one, or really anything. You want to start the conversation by saying the following: who are the first 1,000 people that I can talk to, that I need to talk to, that can either make the business and idea sustainable or scalable or both?
Hmm. Is that your idea?
Oh no, that's Seth Godin's. I
Oh, you
paraphrase
said
it
that.
in my
Yeah.
own.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I paraphrase that in some ways. Like for example, the thing I take credit for is picking the right vertical. So like
Hmm.
I had the idea to go after podcast hosts, but Seth is and I'll send you the episode after the show. I'm sure you'll like it.
Yeah.
But the idea is just, how do you think about change from smallest to biggest? Because if you start to just go, oh, let's influence 5 million people, well, there's only a very handful of people who can do that. Start ground up and work your way up over time so that you can grow influence. And I think the positive part in this narrative, because I always like focusing on the positive, I'm a hardcore optimist at heart. Think about Gary Vee. At the end of the day, he's this 45-year-old old man who owns a marketing agency, and he's got millions of followers. So it's about understanding that 1,000 core fans and really appealing to them in a way that they become super fans and spread the word for you.
That makes sense. Yeah. And that's, I mean, I don't think I knew this. I knew maybe some of this when I started this podcast, but the idea you keep talking about, the truth is in the middle, and then appealing to just a small group. I mean, that was the idea, was to truth in dialogue, right? Find the truth of any topics, whether they're important or polarizing or simple. Find them through simple, honest dialogue, and appeal. If I can get one person to have that idea as well, to, oh, I should maybe speak to people instead of labeling them, or I should empower my speech through learning how to speak better, whatever it may be, then I've really done something. I've helped somebody besides myself.
Absolutely, man. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So what has been your kind of, method of growing this? Are you doing a lot of podcasts?
Yeah, definitely. So the way that I think about my strategy is very different. A lot of people emphasize 80/20, which is create 20% of the content and spend 80% of the time promoting, or vice versa.
Hmm.
Spend 80% of your time creating content or 20% promoting. Really depends. My strategy is different. It's 99/1, which is spend 1% of your time creating phenomenal content. So I spend an hour a day, just making a YouTube video for like the next 5 years. Spend the other 99% promoting it. I think most people don't spend enough time promoting their content, and that's why they lose in this space. I always like to say, man, the best way to get to 10,000 followers is to have 10,000 interactions, 10,000 conversations, 10,000 one on one chats. And over time, it's those conversations that allow you to scale your message. And once again, bringing this back to the people at the top of this game, Gary Vee, Tony Robbins are examples I like to name here. The reason is because at their level, they still have a lot of one on one conversations with the general public. Every vlog I see Gary and he's talking, he's probably on the phone with like the CEO of this big company, and some kid walks up to me like, "Can I take a picture with you?" And he goes like, "Yeah, wait a sec." He's telling the CEO it's like 2 seconds, and he takes a picture with the kid. It's like crazy. So even people like him understand that even if you have millions of followers, the game is won. The ideas are won on one-on-one interaction. That is how you win over time. And then those people go ahead and scale your message. So for me, since I provide educational content that's helpful for people, the best medium for me to win at, even if it's not scalable, but eventually does become over time, is just to guest on a bunch of shows, because I can explain the full range of my thoughts. And for anyone who wants to learn more about perspective or different ways of thinking, they can listen to somebody like me and make a decision as to whether or not they like me. Hopefully, they do, and then they watch the YouTube video. And if they don't, at least I'll know why, because they might send me some hate love. But, but yeah, that's the way I think about it. Is 10,000 conversations.
Yeah, and so I don't know if you know, but we're in an election year. And
We are
so it's coming
Tuesday,
up.
actually. It's like in
Yep,
2 days.
we're recording this on Sunday the 1st. So yeah, we're coming up on an election. So how many of your conversations nowadays just automatically stray into politics, given the climate we're in?
Good question. You'll be surprised to hear the answer.
Zero.
Zero.
Wow.
So now the question is, why is it zero? The answer is because I make sure none of my friends are a part of that. And the reason, let me explain. Look, once again, Shamat Polyapati explains this really well. I'll send you that episode too. I got a lot of stuff to send you, Toby, after this. But anyways, the
Sure.
point that I
Take it
want to
off.
drive, right? I think the point that I drive is it's always about, for me, it's always about the truth is always in the middle, like your podcast is. And what I've realized is at the end of the day, no matter how much I yell, no matter how much I scream, the results of the political election are going to stay the same. It's just whoever's going to win is going to win.
Yeah.
And if I'm being completely honest, the delta between one winning over the other isn't as big as the media and everyone else portrays.
You're right.
It just isn't. If you look at it factually, most people will hate me. Obviously, not your audience, I guess, but it's just the truth. So if you can't control 99% of it, you might as well focus on the one problem you can actually take ownership on. So for me, and I remember I said it last time at Unity now, so I'm happy to re-explain it again, is this idea that the world would be better. I have the secret formula to life that would advance society. It's a very secret recipe, and I'm going to share all my secrets today. The secret is pick one problem and hope that you can solve it in your lifetime. I don't try and complicate my life, Toby. I've picked two problems. One is what I call the problem that we're uniquely positioned to solve, which for me ended up being public speaking. It's my gift in the same way yours is facilitating conversation, helping others support. And as I get to know you more, I'm sure I can find other talents that you have that most people don't. So that's the one focus. And the second one is what I call the world's easiest problem. Too many people ask the following question: what are you passionate about? But they don't go into what is the world's easiest problem to solve. So when you ask that question, the conversation becomes a lot more interesting, because you can take people from the complete opposite ends of the political system, bring them together in the center, and just say, by the way, guys and gals, do you think that every human being should have a clean drinking glass of water every day, like clean water to drink? They're probably both going to say yes, unless they're very crazy in the head for some reason. But chances are they'll say yes. Why don't we focus on that problem first? We can knock it out together. Let's all be a team here, knock it out in 5 years. In the same way, by the way, that gay marriage was legalized so quickly. Everyone on both sides kind of said, this is pretty ridiculous. This should probably be legalized. Let's all work together. Massachusetts legalized it over and over and over again. 7 or 8 years later, all states legalized it. Simple, right?
Right.
Right. Well, not simple. It's still a hard problem to solve, but you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Relative to I don't know, gun rights that a lot of people get very emotional about on both sides.
Oh yeah,
So
many other
right,
topics. Yeah.
or literally like 90% of them. So my point of view is let's focus on the 10% that's easy. Like, what's wrong with doing something easy? Get some momentum going, because most of people's narratives now is pessimism, 2020, and then solve those problems and then conquer the rest. That's why for me, I'm taking ownership of public speaking. If I can't democratize it, if I die before I'm successful, it's my fault. Like, I'm always open about it. It's my fault. I screwed up. If I miss a week on MasterTalk, it's my fault. I screwed it up. But if everyone did that for all 44,733 problems or whatever the number is, the world would just be a better place. We'd probably have a lot less problems.
Yeah, I think that ties into Jordan Peterson's 12 rules for life. One of them is to take care of yourself, fix yourself, take care of your problems, and then you can change the world. And you do that by, it doesn't mean you have to start a company like MasterTalk. It doesn't mean that you have to solve one of those 44,000 problems. It could just mean that the process of taking care of yourself kind of reverberated around you. And so maybe you're doing better with your family, you're doing better with your friends, your immediate community. And that itself can swell out as well and change the world. But piggyback what you said as well. You can pick one of those 44,000 problems, the easiest one to take care of, and solve that as well once you've taken care of yourself.
Completely agree with you, man. I think that's the golden rule. Just most people are too, they let the emotions cloud their judgment. It's really hard. I call this game master thinking, right? So let's say you have a chessboard, right? There's three types of pieces on the board, or three types of components of a chessboard. You have the pawn, who follows what everyone else wants them to do. You have the chess piece, who gives the illusion that they have full control of their life when they're not the actual player moving the pieces. So the bishop might say, yeah, I'm an executive of a company. I got the white picket fence. I got the 2.5 kids. I got the wife or the husband. I killed it. When in reality, you wanted to be a cartoonist and you chose not to out of insecurity, right? That's kind of like the chess piece.
Right.
It's a good way of explaining it. And then you have the game master, who controls all of the pieces and moves everything on the board. So if you use politics once again as an example, the pawn might say, I'm a Democrat because all of my friends are Democrat. The chess piece might say, well, no, it's not because all of my friends are Democrat. It's because of X, Y, and Z policy. Yeah, right. It's because all your friends are Democrats. And the game master goes, why am I only picking between two sides? Why is there only two sides to pick from? Who made this decision? How did this happen? It's just most people aren't willing to think like a game master.
You're right. And what you described with the CEO, that's kind of how Facebook has become, or Instagram or Twitter. It's like a lot of people live their lives through those images that they share, and everything's all great and hunky-dory. And in reality, I'm sure you have people like this where their life isn't really like that, and they don't share their entire existence, their entire experience in life. They're only showing you the highlights and the good things.
And by the way, Toby, guilty as charged. I mean, look at my Instagram. Like you just see me in fancy suits, and in my videos, you don't see me like this on a mattress talking. Guilty as charged. I do the same thing.
Well, but you have a company, right? Isn't there a difference there?
I mean, there is absolutely. We have to put up an image, but at the end of the day, right? I think what I'm trying to push here, and you probably agree, is this idea that even the people who criticize social media and everything seem to follow in the same direction, anyways. Even when we know the problems in the system, hence why we need to focus on those one or two problems that we can solve and really focus in on them, because it's only when we start doing that the noise around us starts to go down. And another point is that you mentioned, or that I'd like to build upon rather,
Mhm.
is this idea. It's a philosopher who calls it mimetic theory, René Girard, and basically what he argues. He was one of Peter Thiel's like greatest teachers. He says that most human beings actually do what everyone else wants them to do. Like they just copy other people because that's what they think the success is. So let's say I'm someone point A and I realize everyone else is a lawyer. Well, I interpret that as the only way for me to be successful in life is to be a lawyer because that's what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of courage to just look at everyone and go, everyone's wrong.
Right.
That's tough.
Yeah, and I'm going to decide what's best for me based on my own path. Yeah, that's a good point. And when I'm talking about social media, I'm not, so in that regard, I'm not saying social media is the problem there. I'm saying it's the decisions being made by individuals using that as a platform to live their life and not communicating, like even just to your immediate family, not communicating what's actually going on, to your family. And so in that,
Right, I
yeah,
completely agree.
yeah,
Yeah, that's how I interpret it as well. Absolutely.
yeah. So what else is going on? What else are you working on? You are following and talking about some great minds like Peter Thiel, and you said you started MasterTalk at what, 22?
You got it, absolutely.
And so that makes you what, 24, 25?
Very yeah, you got it. I'm 24 now, yeah.
Okay, so you're far too young to be so smart and so connected right now.
Too kind of you to say, Toby.
What so you have, a world ahead of you. What's next? What's going on? What else is happening?
Right, I'll only say this because of how great the observation was. And what I mean by that is a lot of people think I'm young, whereas I think that I just have a hard head start and that's it. You know what I think with the secret, or I guess I know I keep saying the word secret, but I think rather the thing that's made me successful, not really secret, is the fact that I listen to thousands of people's opinions. Like when I mean the truth is in the middle, I enforce that as much as possible in my own life. That's why I like people like Teal, because he's the kind of person who would go, here's what this person argues, and that's why. Here's what this person argues, and here's why. And here's why both those people are wrong. You're just like, nobody says that. Nobody communicates in that way. But because I've watched all of these people who have the one advantage that I don't, which is lived time, lived experience,
Mm-hmm.
I can look at and make a list objectively of all of the mistakes they've made in their lives and make sure I don't make them. So let me kind of run a gamut to give people a feel for how I think. The biggest mistake Peter Thiel made, even if people can argue isn't really a mistake, is he just spent too many years in law school when he should have started PayPal much earlier. So he would have had a much better idea on how the vertical changed, and it would have increased his success rate. PayPal, obviously, he had a fantastic exit with it, but he also
Yeah.
barely made it out. So the same thing with other people I look up to. Most of them seem to have wasted their 20s. They just go, oh, like 20s, I gotta like follow all these people. And then they realize in the 30s, they have this awakening. That's kind of like a common theme that I've seen with a lot of these thinkers. So with me, well, I just got fortunate. A lot of these amazing people were sharing insights for free, right, through podcasting.
Right.
So when I was 18 and 17, Toby, I started listening to a lot of these people and I was able to accumulate all of their knowledge at rapid speed because 30 years ago you weren't able to do that. You had to consume that same knowledge through books, and each book's like an 8-hour investment,
Right.
so you wouldn't have been able to go through those many people. But since I did that at scale, you can think of my brain like there's 1,000 tape recorders that are always playing. So, for example, oh crap, this person got divorced at 32. This happened. Why did that happen? Oh, how do I avoid divorce if I'm not even in a relationship right now? I asked myself these weird, bizarre, questions that most people. So basically, what I'm saying is I try and avoid the pitfall before it even becomes a problem, before there's even a pitfall to fall into. And by doing so, my hope and my goal is to optimize the one resource that I can't buy more of, which is my time. So I think that's why I was able to take action on Master Talk so quickly, because after I asked myself hundreds of questions about life, I realized that every rule in society was made up. It's like, oh, you should have like 2.5 kids. Oh, you should retire even if Steve Jobs died at 56 and Kobe Bryant died at 41. no, you should wait until you're older. But then when you get older, you have to focus on the kids. And then when you focus on the kids, you got to pay the mortgage. And after you pay the mortgage, you're too old. And then you have to retire and do nothing. Then you're dead. So I'm just like, wait a second, that doesn't make sense either. So when I did all of that, that's where conviction comes from, Toby. It comes from an understanding that you've looked at as many rocks as you could, as many questions, and then you say this is the best direction that makes the most sense. That's why I do weird stuff like, oh, let me just start a YouTube channel on public speaking, even if I don't have a bachelor's degree in communication, just because from a first principles thinking, I know that this makes more sense and this doesn't make sense. So anyways, let's summarize this all for people. There are 2 exercises that I recommend that you do. The first one is a simple one. The second one is a difficult one. First one is write your own definition of happiness. What does that mean to you? Right? So for me, and I'm happy to share mine, because it'll scare most people, Toby. It's dance mini breaks. I love dancing in between meetings. I work a lot, so it's a good break. I go to clubs, never drink though, but I love dancing 7 hours straight. I love Justin Bieber. I can karaoke in 8 different languages. I love yelling at my friends over long dinners, eating Korean food, and arguing over extremely controversial topics about life. That's for me. That's fun. That's happiness. For other people, they'll look at that and go, yeah, I think I'd rather go for a hike or read a book.
Right.
It's just
just back up a second. Did you say
please
you could karaoke in 8 different languages?
Yeah, I'm pretty weird. yeah, but I think the point is, I'm happy to tell you. Did you want to know the 8 languages or?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the 8 languages are, so I speak English, French, and Tamil. Those are the 3 languages I'm fluent in. But in addition to those 3, I can karaoke in Korean, Mandarin, Japanese, Hindi, and Spanish. So yeah, very bizarre. I know. But
you can't. You're not fluent in those others, but can sing in those.
That's correct.
So you can read them on a screen.
No. They're called in Korean it's called hangsung. So basically, what it is when Korean words gets translated in English, but they're not English words. They're how you pronounce the word in Korean, right? So let's say hi in Korean is "안녕하세요." I wouldn't be able to recognize that with Korean characters. I just wouldn't. I don't know how to read Korean. I just know how to pronounce Korean. I don't know. Very bizarre. But the point that I'm driving is a lot of you are listening to me like, I don't want to sing in Korean. I don't want to dance. I don't want to yell at my friends. What if other people are watching me at the restaurant? Which I frankly don't care. I just get yelling at people at restaurants. So the point is, where's your list?
Yeah.
We all have different definitions of happiness. It's clearly very unique in the same way. I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Maybe you'll say, well, maybe I don't like clubbing. Maybe I like reading a book or something. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But the point is, write it down strategically because 99% of people out there, and I wish I was exaggerating the number, but it seems to be the case based on the people I've seen in my life, are using other people's definition. It statistically doesn't even make sense. How could you have the exact same things that bring you happiness versus with the 5 other people that you spend time with? How could you all have the exact same list?
Yeah.
It just wouldn't make sense. You have to be copying. So my argument is don't do it. That's the easy thing.
Yeah.
Easy exercise that people can take from my rambling. There is one other exercise that is very difficult. Okay. And the difficult exercise is to write down all of the controversial thoughts that you have about life. Every single one. And you have to update it all the time. That is how you develop thought leadership, and that is also how you develop your own truth. So for me, it didn't start with, oh yeah, I just woke up one morning, Toby, in my basement. I just said, yo, I gotta start a public speaking YouTube channel. No. It starts by saying the following. Let's backtrack, rewind the tape.
Yeah.
The first chapter of that tape is, hey, wait a second. Why is all the content in public speaking so bad? Do a bit of research. Now forward the tape. And then I'm 5 hours into research. And I'm like, wait, why is this person a PhD, but all of their videos make 0 sense to me? Next thing.
Can I
next thing, please
time out there for a second? Go
please
even further. Why does it matter that all this public speaking is bad? Why did you care?
That's the thing. People will care about different things. In the same way, you got a podcast and I don't, right? So I would look at you and go, "Why do you have a podcast?"
You should
Doesn't
have a
make sense to me.
podcast, by the way.
Yeah, I know, but like, yeah, fair enough. Guilty as charged. We can talk offline why I don't have one
Yeah.
yet, but sure. But the idea is the reason I cared about public speaking so
Hmm.
much was because of my personal life story. So I grew up on public speaking. I hated it most of my life. And then when I started competing at these weird, bizarre business competitions, I fell in love with it. I just became this obsession. So I'll give you an idea. It's hard to explain, but I'll try my best.
Sure.
So in my university, let's say there was 8,000 business students, okay, like business school.
Hmm.
And in that university, 80 of those people were in this program. And in this program, people, like I'm not even joking, people spend thousands of dollars a year, like the school funds it.
Yeah.
They fly out all across the globe. We're talking Thailand, Germany. I'm trying to think of it. Guatemala. There's a couple that come to mind. We fly out from around the world, spend thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands, to get to the country and give PowerPoint presentations. That is literally a thing. That's why I have friends in 40 different countries or something like that, even if I've traveled to like 7 of them. Because one of the competitions in the world, one of the biggest ones, is held in my city, Montreal. 19 countries from around the world come to Montreal. People from Thailand, people from, you know, Bangladesh, and like just to give PowerPoint presentations. I know it's bizarre, Toby. It's like a subculture within a subculture. And that was my life for 3 years. 3 years, did 50 of these competitions myself. Think of me as, this is a great way of explaining myself. I'm the Michael Jordan that nobody gives a shit about. That's like the perfect description. In the sense
Yeah.
of like, Michael Jordan was this, like he was an ass to his teammates. He was like pushing them boundaries. I was exactly like him
Hmm.
in the context of presentations. So let's say when I was the king of that, or not king, dictator is the right word. When I was the dictator of that program, literally how this worked is 400 people to apply for this thing. Let me backtrack a bit. The reason why people do this, because I'm sure people are wondering, why are you doing these competitions? Is because a lot of the people go on to get the best jobs out of business school. Think about bankers on Wall Street, management consultants, people who start at like 6 figures, right? That's kind of like the
Yeah.
thing. And they all become senior executives in their early 30s. Really cool people. A lot of my friends do that. So I joined these competitions. So we're in these competitions. 400 people apply, 80 people get in. One of the questions I ask, okay, in the final round, there's like 4 rounds or something like the one, two, sorry, 3 rounds. And in the third round, I'm the person interviewing each person. And I ask stuff like, what do you plan on doing during the holidays? And they go, oh, I love taking vacation for 2 weeks in Florida. And I always respond with, you're not getting in the program. Because the competition is the first week of January. I spent the last 3 Christmases when I was in university at school. At school.
Yeah.
Because the competition was the week after. So, anyways, long story short, I was obsessed with presentation. That was my life. Every dinner conversation, every lunch conversation, while other guys would talk about sports, I was talking about, hey, did you see the University of Florida give their introduction presentation yesterday? They sucked. Or like, or that university, they're really good. Or we need to do better here.
And who are these conversations with?
Other people in the
Yeah.
program. So obviously, most people don't want to talk about these things.
Sure.
So that's how I got really good at communication. By the way, Toby, I guess relatively
Yeah.
speaking, is between the ages of 19 and 23. A good way of understanding this for people who are listening is I learned 40 years of communication information in 4, right? Because I was presenting every day, and I'm not exaggerating. This is actual
Oh, I
truth. I
believe
was
you.
either
Yeah.
presenting or I was coaching somebody else. So like I remember one night, I think it was like Christmas Eve or something. By the way, I loved every second of this. This is the worst part of the story. I would like coach 3 teams in a row. It's like 8 p.m. accounting, 10 p.m. Or rather like 9 p.m. International business, 10:30 p.m. strategy, 11 p.m. dinner with all 3 teams. And then I wouldn't go home. I'd either sleep at school or like, I don't know, maybe stay at somebody else. It was nuts, crazy. But obviously we did really well. I mean, we were the best. We were the best in the world for a reason.
Wow.
So when I started watching these videos, because remember, in my little circle of people, I'm above average. Maybe I'll give you some credit. Maybe good, possibly great, possibly, but it's like good. Like there's a lot of great speakers in my program. But when I looked at the world, like when I got out of that weird shell and I was graduated and I started making money and I was like, whoa, money. It was so weird. So when I started watching those YouTube videos, like I was so furious. I was like, this is so bad. Like, what do you mean be yourself? This is garbage advice. I would never tell any of my students to do this. But it kept happening over and over and over and over. And then I realized where all the information was shit. The reason it was shit was because speech coaching is extremely lucrative. Think about the person who's coaching Joe Biden. Think about the person who's coaching the guys on Wall Street to speak better so they can do better deals. Imagine how much money those people are getting paid.
Sure.
So the people who are just as good as me, I probably put myself in the top 5% just so people have an idea of a number. So people who are better than me or just as good as me get paid a lot of money, which means they're not incentivized to create free content.
Sure.
And that pissed me off so much, man. I got so pissed off that at some point after a couple of days of watching these videos, I just said, "You guys suck so badly that I can do better in my mother's basement with no budget and a phone." And that's exactly what happened. But I thought it was a stupid idea once again. I was just so mad, really. But then after MasterTalk turned into what it is. So what's the takeaway for people? Because I know I sound like a deranged, crazy person, which I am. But I am totally crazy. Well, if you're not insane, you're going to be like everyone else.
Well, when you're saying it's mad and you're crazy, it's like when you described that the top 5% of what you do, so it sounds like you could make a lot of money if you went into that market, right? But you chose the far other end, right? And you wanted to give this away.
Right. So one thing I want to clarify, I'm just as selfish as those 5%, right? Because I want this to be aligned. Like I'm not like some selfless like Jesus or something. No. I make good money as a speech coach. I don't charge as much as they do, but I probably will eventually. That's not the problem I had with them. Because if you're making your money, the market is the market. I don't have an issue with that, right? Here's the thing that pissed me off, Toby. If you're going to make a lot of money, for me, this is just a core belief, give back to the community. Like give back to the community. Why is it so hard to make a video every week just sharing all of your knowledge for free? You're still going to make your money.
Yeah.
Maybe you might even make more money. It's just the selfishness, the laziness just drove me crazy. That's what pissed me off. I'm going to make a lot of money in my life, and I'm happy to say that publicly. But if I'm going to do that, I am going to share everything I know for free. So that when I'm dead, people can learn from me, especially when 4 years ago I couldn't afford me, right?
Yeah.
That's when I want to drive. So anyways, the point of this conversation, and feel free to follow up, is this idea that I want everyone to do the same. I want you all to write a list of all of your controversial beliefs. I love Peter Thiel's question. What is the truth that you believe in that most people disagree with you on? It is one of the hardest questions you'll answer in your life, but is the one that will give you the most clarity. I probably have 37 answers to the question at this point. I'm still thinking about it every day. And that is where the juice comes in. That's where the interesting insights for your life will come from. Because everything that you believe that most people don't are probably the things you want to spend more attention on. I'll give you one of those examples from my thinking. I was talking to a friend a couple weeks ago, and he was asking me this question. He said, thinking about Gen Z and Gen X, I wonder what behaviors the next generation will have." And I was there thinking, I'm like, that's such a stupid question to ask. And then I stopped myself and I was like, wait a second, I think I just got a new insight. And the insight is the questions that you think are interesting that most people aren't interested to answer are probably the questions that you should spend more time thinking about.
It's a good tip.
Right. So,
yeah.
Right. So for me, it was like, hey, why aren't these professional speech coaches who make $500,000 a year sharing all of this information for free? Nobody asked that question because nobody cares. And I can't blame you because you didn't go through that weird, wild experience that I did with communication. But the technique, the principle applies as much as it did to me, to you. To you, it could be, hey, I love cupcakes my whole life. I've been eating these cupcakes and I've always loved to make them with my mom. And then one day I woke up And I realized after shopping at every single cupcake store in the city, because I'm a connoisseur, that all these cupcakes suck. Why is that? See, that's a question I don't care about. But the person who's listening to this, who probably likes cupcakes, goes, "Hey, Brenden, that's not a stupid question. That's an interesting question." And that's the point.
I'm just hearing you mention cupcakes twice and thinking, man, I got to lose some weight or something. This guy thinks I mean a lot of cupcakes.
That was not a direct attack on you, Toby. In case it was, I apologize.
No, I'm just joking. No, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of questions that, like the public speaking, I would never care to ask that question. But maybe I do now because I'm sitting here talking to you on a YouTube video. But yeah, that's a good point. And you can use that as one of those, as a path to the truths you were talking about, the Peter Thiel question.
Right, yeah. The truth that is unique to you.
Yeah. Wow. So I don't know. I think you do have a future podcasting. You can tell me why offline you're not hosting a podcast. If not, you're going to be on Rogan within a couple of years. I can tell you that.
That's very kind of you, man. I appreciate that.
I can say just from the conversation, you are super smart and highly driven. You're at a position at your age where the average person is not. I would maybe around your circle, but certainly not, what I'm used to. So hopefully my kids, I can push them to be half as driven as where you were at the age of 18, 19, consuming how many hours of, or how many years of content, what you said, in 4 years. So
a lot. Yeah, I was doing probably 10 hours a week of podcasting a week. Yeah.
Wow. Well, we're right at about an hour, but I'm sure we could spend 4 or 5 hours hearing about your beliefs on all kinds of things and learn a lot about. But I know you have probably 4 more podcasts after this, right?
You could say that for sure.
Awesome. Well, people can find you, of course, on YouTube at MasterTalk. Where else? Instagram, Facebook, right?
Yeah, for sure. So usually the best place to go to learn more from me is definitely MasterTalk, the YouTube channel. And then if you want to message me on Instagram, you can find my handle on that page. I'm really easy to track, so don't be shy to send me a message. I'm always happy to connect.
And what's coming up next? You post a video, I think, every Sunday, right?
You got it, man. So really the strategy these days is how do I write as much content for as long as I can stretch this out until COVID's over. And then when COVID's over, it's back to the streets, man. Just back to flying out to events and back to getting back on action.
Yeah, even now, though, I can see it, like I mentioned before briefly, I can see a space where you could help out sales teams learn to sell virtually, right? Because now all of a sudden they're in this weird space where they're not sitting down in front of somebody. They're, in front of a camera speaking to somebody. And I think that does something, to you. It kind of adds that pressure of being on a video versus having a conversation, even though you're having the same conversation by and large. So I don't know. That could be an idea for you.
Absolutely, man. Definitely something to consider.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to join me, and we'll put all your links in the description below. And that's it. Take care, man.
You too, man. Thanks for your time.
Yep. For more long-form discussions like this, check out our full episodes playlist here. And for specialized content, check out our featured clips here. And also check out our other featured channels for more great examples of truth in dialogue.